Hi, are you one of the millions of 401k or 403b participants who got one of your statements in the not to in the past that essentially showed towards the end in most cases a figure that basically shows what your current 401k balance or 403b balance would pay you as an income annuity at age 67. And if you're married, they'll also give you a calculation for your spouse. Well, we've been getting this question a lot since 401k providers have been putting this on their statements. It's a rule by the Department of Labor. They have to show this calculation, but a lot of people are confused by it, and it doesn't really uh, give, we think, a good indicator of what those incomes would actually be because they're using today's um, current balances. So, this is Michael Girali with Healthcare Genius, and our goal on this channel is to always provide information about healthcare and retirement topics that are timely and that are important to our viewers. We hope that you'll subscribe to our channel. If you look down, you'll see a little subscribe button. That'll then notify you when we put out new content. And of course, we appreciate your comments. And down at the bottom, at the end of this presentation, you'll have some information that we'll add to the area. So what we're going to do today is go through um, this presentation, and we call it uh, Turn Your IRA, 401k, or 403b into a guaranteed lifetime pension. And again, that's because of the fact that people are seeing these numbers and they're really questioning what they mean. We created, we're the creators of of TIP, which is basically a tailored individual pension plan. And what that's been designed to do is to replace what used to be there as far as your grandparents had or your parents had from a retirement plan that had four different components to it. One was guaranteed lifetime income, which is the pension side. Another is healthcare. The third is coverage for chronic illnesses like long term care coverage. And then finally, life insurance for either final expense or for heirs. So I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen and we'll get started. So, why guarantee your income? Well, one reason is to protect against longevity risk. My mother happens to be 93 this year. She just turned a couple of weeks ago, and she never thought she'd live to 93. We're hoping she'll live to 123, and she may. She's very healthy. So that's one reason is to protect against longevity and outliving your income. It's one of the biggest fears that people have. Another thing is, peace of mind for your spouse, so that there are dollars for your spouse, and if you have one, or again for yourself, that you're not going to outlive. Protection against market risk. Uh, the market's been fairly volatile over the last year, but people are concerned about that, and they want to protect, especially as they get close to retirement. They don't want to see some big downturn that will impact their ability to take money from their plan or the amount of money that they want to take. And we'll address that in a little bit. Um, Inflation protection. There are components of some guarantee income plans that can provide inflation protection. So that's another thing, because as we can see, certainly this past year in 2022, inflation really went up and people were impacted by that. And so you want to have something that can keep up with that. And then finally, study after study shows that retirees who have guaranteed income, they are happier and they live longer. So again, that's where most of our clients and most of our viewers are wanting to certainly have happier and live longer. So what are some types of guaranteed income? Now, not all of these are guaranteed, but we'll talk through them. So a lot of times people use a bond strategy. They'll buy bonds and use the interest from those bonds um, to pay themselves an income. Now, when we're talking about IRAs or 401ks or 403bs, In most cases, those distributions are going to be taxable unless they happen to be held in a Roth account. But bond portfolios are one way that people in the past have used to generate income in retirement. Another way is dividend paying stocks. So picking stocks that you're not necessarily looking for the appreciation, but with the dividends they pay, and then using those dividends to provide income in retirement. Real estate, very popular. We know lots of people who have a rental property strategy where they've purchased different rental properties, and they're going to depend on that for their income in retirement. Again, while those aren't none of those are guarantee, they do provide a source of income that people, in most cases, can count on. But again, there's some issues when the housing market goes down, or again when the stock market goes down, or in the case of bonds, when interest rates go up. And we've seen that impacted with some of the recent bank failures, specifically Silicon Valley Bank. So another thing to look at. But when we're talking about real guaranteed income, normally we're discussing either a single premium immediate annuity, and that's essentially where you're taking your account balance in an IRA, your 401k or 403b, and you're giving that to an insurance company. And in turn, the insurance company is going to start paying you a guaranteed lifetime income that normally starts the month after you provide them those dollars. That guaranteed income can be for your life only. It can be for your spouse in your life, and it can even have a guarantee period, 10 years, 20 years, that will then provide your heirs some residual benefits from that annuity if something happens to you and your spouse early on. And then finally, fixed or indexed annuities, where you're not necessarily looking at them to turn on income today, although you can. Um, but we'll go through an example of one of these, and this is where we see some of the inflation protection that can be added. Again, that can also be added to a single premium immediate annuity. So why not keep your assets in stocks? Well, definitely you want to have some money in stocks, and um, but there are a lot of people who are concerned about stocks, as I said earlier. The market volatility. While it's great when things are going up, it's not so great when things are going down. Also, if we see a crash that happens early on when you retire and you start to take withdrawals out, that can really impact how much money you can take out. Um, and then people are emotional. We saw this in 2008. We saw it again in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. When the markets went down, people sell, and oftentimes they don't buy back in. The people who keep their money in and are able to let that continue to stay in the market fared very well in that, but the people who didn't do so great. Um, Cognitive impairments is a big thing. A lot of times we'll find, either the husband or the wife is doing the finances. They may be doing the investments. They may have a financial advisor doing it for them. But when you look at those situations, if they're doing it themselves, and all of a sudden one of them gets sick, then or has a cognitive impairment, then that can really create an issue with that portfolio and managing it. And then finally, the transfer tax liability to heirs. When you're talking about IRAs, they're not the best things to transfer, or again, 401ks and 403bs, because they'll be taxable to your heirs. It used to be those heirs could take those assets and string them out throughout their lifetime. There's now a 10-year limit on that, so that can create another issue. Now, the 4% rule has been around since, 94. William Bengen talked about it and wrote an article about it in one of the financial publications. And the idea was that he looked at a number of different, matter of fact, he looked across the market, I think, since 1926, all these different periods, did statistical analysis on it. And he basically said at that time that if you had a 50-50 or 60-40 portfolio of stocks to bonds, that you could comfortably take out 4% and increase that each year with inflation. Now, what happened with low interest rates is that we saw low bond rates, and so that didn't necessarily hold up, because the bond rates that he was looking at, I think, were about 5% historically. And of course, prior to the inflation starting in 2022, bond rates were, you know, 2%, 2.5%, something like that. So now I think, we see this kind of go all over the board. I think I saw something recently where he had come out and thought 4.5% would be okay to take out, and that your portfolio would stay up based on his statistical analysis. So again, that's really been a common rule that most financial planners have used, and individuals have used when they're thinking about distributions. So what do we do or what should you be doing to look at your portfolio and try to figure out how much you can take out of your plan? Um, there's a lot of software out there. We happen to have access to one type of software that does basically crash testing scenarios. So they essentially say, what happens if China invades Taiwan? What would that do to the market? And then they'll show that scenario based on how you've allocated your portfolio. And in this case, we looked at two crashes. We assumed one happening as we talked at that year one. And then we also looked at one at year 10 of your retirement. So at age 66 and at age 76 in this case. And you can see that with that graph, that the portfolio basically goes away at year 20. We assumed a 5% distribution here. If you had done 4%, it would last a little longer. So just be aware of that. Obviously, if the market never crashes and things are great and it continues to go up, then your portfolio is going to stay and will last your lifetime, most certainly. Um, on the flip side, in this example, we just took a crash at year 10, and then we assumed that the market bounced back up after that year by 25%. And it took the duration of the income stream from year 20 to year 30. So if you were 65 and you did this, it took it all the way out to 95. But again, we're looking at my mom, she's 93, only a couple years away. Um, those dollars, that portfolio could be shrinking. And at some point, it could run out of money. So that's why we stress test portfolios. I'm sure that if you have an investment advisor, they do this for you, but it's something you should be looking at just to kind of understand what the risk is to your current allocation and then maybe to a future allocation that you would have. Um, Now, when it comes to an annuity, again, what we looked at here was just an indexed annuity with inflation protection. We talked about the fact that there's all sorts of different types of annuities. But in this particular case, this is an example of one that will allow you to take some of your dollars, and those dollars then will mirror an index. So in the first example, we took a little over a $2 million portfolio. This happened to be one of our friends that we did this for. And in the first year, the income would be 91,473. Now we assume that the index never performed throughout their lifetime. So therefore, that 91,473 never went up. So it didn't have any inflation in this example because the index didn't go up. And that index could be the S&P 500. There's all sorts of different options on there. Highly unlikely that would happen, but it could. And so that's really kind of the floor in this example. So it's about 4.5% of the portfolio that the individual would be able to take out throughout their lifetime. It would never run out of money. If they wanted to add a spouse, they could, but then those distributions would be lower based on both the spouse and individual. Now, if those indexes over that period were to go up on average 3% a year, then at year 10, that 91,473 is going to grow to 119. So you can begin to see the importance of the inflation protection. It's gone up almost 30,000 in that 10 years, or roughly 30% over that period of time. So, which again goes to the 3%. If we looked at 5%, it's 141,000, and at 10%, excuse me, at 7%, it's 180,000. So this is one of the things that, with annuities you can look at and make a determination whether this might fit or does fit with some of your portfolio, and really how you can turn your IRA, 401k, 403b into an annuity, just like your grandparents had if they had a pension plan. Maybe your parents today have if they have a pension plan, so that you don't have to worry about that. So now, what are some of the considerations? Well, risk tolerance is a big one. There's a lot of people who we find they just can't stomach the market, and certainly as they can't do it when they're working. It's very difficult once they're retired because they don't want to lose that principal. So that's one thing to be thinking about. What are your other assets? What are, do you have things that you could tap into if the market were to go down, that you wouldn't have to necessarily sell at a loss? So again, that's another thing that you'd look at. Taxes are important. We talked about that. You always want to be looking at taxes. We think taxes have to go up when you look at the national debt at $31 trillion, and with Social Security and Medicare, what those liabilities are. The most recent report that just came out on Social Security said that the trust fund would run out of funds by 2034, which means that they'll only be able to pay 80 cents on the dollar. So if you're going to get $1,000 a month at 2034, you'd start getting 800. So these are real concerns. The government's telling us this, and we know that demographics, because we have more people going on to Social Security, impact that as well. Looking at your fixed cost, housing, healthcare, so kind of that Medicare piece, other fixed costs that you might have. A lot of times people will want to have some sort of guaranteed income to cover those fixed costs. So that's something else to be thinking about when you're trying to determine how much you would want to allocate to having fixed dollar amounts. Because again, a lot of people in the past have depended on Social Security as their fixed account. Again, those people who have individual pension or have pensions through their companies today have those dollars. They can certainly afford to take more risk. But for people who only have their 401k or 403b or their IRAs, this is a way to guarantee some of that income. And then heirs, we know that when it comes to annuitization, specifically those single premium immediate annuities, if you live long enough, your heirs probably aren't going to get anything from those annuities. And that would be the same for the fixed indexed annuities, is that if you live long enough, they're probably not going to be necessarily the dollars in there, but you'll still have that income, which is really what's key. And then other reasons that people would be looking at. So I think the final thought we have on this is that, what kind of person are you? Are you a set it and forget it? Do you want to know that when you get to retirement, that check's going to be in the mail? Or are you the person, I think of them as chores, because let's face it, managing a portfolio, managing rentals, I've done that in the past. All of those things require work. And a lot of times people don't want to do that in retirement. They just want to be able to know that they can go on vacation somewhere, they can, and not have to worry about things. But that's independent of the individual. So you definitely want to factor that into your considerations as far as which way to go. At the end of this presentation, at the bottom, as I mentioned, there'll be some resources. We have a couple of other webinars that are on demand that go into more detail about how annuities work. We even have a movie called The Baby Boomer Dilemma that kind of talks about the difference between a 401k, 403b, and or a pension plan. So there'll be resources down there that you can take a look at. Again, Michael Giraldi here.